Hey everybody, it's H, and welcome to the latest installment of Dune Pod, your one-stop shop to get ready for the new Dune movie. This week, I'm joined as always by my co-host Jason.
The J-wave radiation, man. It feasts on eye matter.
And by promising Messiah candidate himself, Protolexus.
Paul still got it, baby.
On this episode, we complete our discussion of the second book in Herbert's hexalogy, Dune Messiah. We explore the tragic fall of Paul Atreides, whether humanity is doomed to repeat our history forever, and document which of us has actually finished reading Infinite Jest. If you're enjoying this podcast, we need your help. Please leave us a rating and a review or share our social media posts, as it really helps new listeners find the show. Thank you. And now, without further ado, Dune Messiah. I worked this afternoon for a couple hours putting together the trailer for Dune Pod.
Oh, like the video trailer?
No, this is just going to be an audio trailer.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
But it's kind of cool because now we have like 8 episodes to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
Proto, how long should a trailer be for a podcast?
I don't know. Probably I would say under 3 minutes.
Okay, I was going to say 8 to 14.
I mean, I wouldn't want to listen to a trailer for more than 3 minutes. In the same way, I wouldn't want to watch a movie trailer, any kind of trailer, for more than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Dune video you sent was so cool.
Did you watch the whole thing?
I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing, but I'm very intrigued.
No, I didn't. When I hit the part that I thought was spoiling something for me, I turned it off because maybe I went a little too far.
Yeah.
Having not read all 6 books.
I don't know if it can be spoiled. I don't know if Dune is spoilable in a real sense. I read some plot descriptions of the new Herbert books that 7 and 8 or whatever that are supposed to finish out the 6, and it was so nonsensical that I was just okay, sure, yeah, why not? There's lots of Golas, there's lots of AI. The Golas and the AI fight. Everyone's a Gola or an AI. I don't know. Sure, sounds good. Let's go.
So we are covering tonight Dune Messiah Part 2. This is the second half of the book, and we switched from moping to action. So hopefully this will be a little more barn burning. And then next week we are going to be returning to the films of Denis Villeneuve to talk about Sicario, which is an incredible film directed by Denis and shot by Roger Deakins. So really excited about that. That's going to be coming up next week. Before we jump into Dune Messiah, just quickly, I'll say for Dune news.
Would you like to know more?
This is 2 weeks in a row with not much happening.
Oh, that's not entirely true. There was a video going around of Timothée Chalamet and Denis Villeneuve having a coffee.
I have not seen this. What happened?
That's the whole story. They had a coffee.
In Budapest?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was during reshoots.
Oh, that's very cool.
Was Timmy in a still suit?
Nope, it wasn't even on set. But
T-shirt.
Just chilling. Tim, I will say, per my concerns with Timothée Chalamet as the Kwisatz Haderach, he was looking a little jumpy, a little wiry. Maybe he had a few too many coffees. Was a little too wound up.
Turkish coffee.
I'm just, my guy needs to break out the digit mills and work on his sensitivities.
Just settle down.
He's a little too jumpy.
Nice. I do want to call out one other little piece. Last week, I directed folks to Denis being interviewed by Roger Deakins on his podcast, Team Deakins. And this week on Team Deakins, it was Greig Fraser, who is the cinematographer for Dune 2020. And he also has done a bunch of other work, but kind of famously did Rogue One and was the DP for Mandalorian. And so just a really, really a great discussion about cinematography and all the technical aspects in there, and him working with Denis. Both of those guys have now worked with Denis, and so just a really cool discussion for those two. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into to Dune. So Dune Messiah. So we talked about last week about sort of the acknowledgement that things haven't gone well. It's been quite a bit of a bummer. Paul's jihad has conquered the galaxy. And meanwhile, we have a cabal of the disenfranchised forces who are rising up against Paul. So you have the Tleilaxu, the Guild, the Bene Gesserit, Irulan, and then a group of the Fremen that are plotting against him. And we have at the end of the last book, or the last session, we had Paul having met with Scytale, who is the face dancer Tleilaxu, who's impersonating this Fremen woman who was killed. He took her place. And Paul knows that it's a trap. He knows that he can't get away from it, but he has to get into it in any case. So the beginning of part 2 here is walking into the trap. So I love this scene of him going out into Arrakeen. He knows that danger abounds. He's talking about, he's got thopters in the distance. He's got Fremen folks undercover, tracking all of his moves as he's making his way through the city. And this is the introduction of the character of Bijaz, who is the dwarf.
Yeah, who's I think referred to as the catalyst dwarf at some point in the novel, which I love as a thing. The idea of there being a catalyst dwarf seems aggressive.
That's my next band name.
Yeah.
I just was trying to figure out this character. He was kind of gestury, but then also somewhat serious. You know that he's caught up in the plot specifically around Duncan or Hate, the Gola, and some kind of programming for him. But he convinces Paul that he has to take him with him. And Paul specifically is reacting to the fact that he's never seen any dwarf in any of his visions.
Right. Yeah. It's another sort of blind moment where because of, overlapping prophecy, or because of he's been shielded by Edric, or because, he's a created entity, Paul's unable to see him. But it's interesting too. He's introduced pretty early in the book. He's introduced in the Farouk scene where Scytale meets Farouk and kills everyone. And it's just an offhand that where Scytale has an internal where he says and Bijaz, the catalyst dwarf, waited with Othium. So it's just it's sort of to the reader as well is something that is in the periphery of your vision, that if you on a second read through, you'd be aware of, but you wouldn't have really clocked in on the first hand. And I think to your point of he's kind of a jester, to me, he just seems he seems like the fool in King Lear, the wise fool that is, both meant to be an object of ridicule, but also the character that's more clued in than anyone else about what's really going on.
I love the character of the dwarf. I think it was brilliant. Next to Duncan Idaho is an amazing character in this book. The way it's written, it's just so well crafted. He reminds me of a character from Alice in Wonderland. The way he speaks, and just what Jason was saying is he's the fool, the wise fool almost, who's saying things that he doesn't even understand, and just the idea that this dwarf would, almost, I forget what he refers to him as, but he has a lot of information, or he records things as it's happening. Just a lot of really cool ideas in that character. I was blown away as I was reading that section where Paul was interacting with him.
Yeah, definitely. So we have Paul basically meets Orthine, who is one of the Fedakeen, who's old and he's dying from disease that he got from some other planet. And there's a little interaction there. It's not anything super significant. But Paul definitely feeling hemmed in, right? He sees there's all these minor variations from his visions. He's trying to find a way out, but he senses terrible violence if he isn't extremely careful and follow the path as closely as possible. And then we have the scene. He takes Bijaz. He knows he has to take Bijaz with him from his vision, so he takes him out. And they're making their way down and hands off Bijaz to Stilgar, who takes off. and then you have this scramble for a second, and then just the screams of stone burner. And this to me is like the coolest thing in the book. You don't know exactly what it is. There's some reference. It is kind of atomic, but it's not a nuclear blast because it hits the side of the street and he's like a quarter mile away. But there's rumblings that if it's not done correctly, the stone burner can burrow down to the core of the planet and split the planet into pieces. So the intensity of it is really amazing, as well as the concept that the radiation would target your eyes specifically and make you blind.
Yeah, the J-wave radiation, man. It feasts on eye matter. It's a good one. I think it's like it's the classic Herbert like sort of introduction of a weird piece of technology that doesn't really have a clean explanation. And I think when you hear about it, when you read about it the first time, I remember I thought I was like, oh, is this like, what is this? Is this like someone has like a flamethrower? Like someone has like a handheld weapon that they've turned on them? Or like, what does this even look like? And
I was picturing like a pillar of fire. Kind of like Salem, or not Salem, Sodom and Gomorrah type story. It's just a giant.
Yeah, that's what
flame.
I pictured too.
Yeah, but what discharges it? Like, is it like a planted device, like a dirty bomb?
Mm-hmm. Because they do describe bringing it there and handing it off in the next scene, which we'll get to with Korba. But it was brought on planet and put into position specifically to take Paul and Chani out.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is like the Bijah's Catalyst Dwarf reference. It's in the same chapter, I think, when the Saitel Farouk chapter, where Farouk says that his son was blinded by a stone burner on Niraj. And so it's like in that scene, which we kind of earmarked last time as one of the great scenes in the book, they kind of set up all the stuff that gets paid off in this scene, both Bijah's and the stone burner.
It reminds me of what Proto said last week, that there's vague references to all these things. So like describing the name of the planet where, he lost his eyes, or Farouk talking about the planet where he went in a sea for the first time and came out as a different person after that. There's just, that conveys the scope of what's happening in this series.
Yeah, Herbert has some stuff figured out. Give it a cool name, Stone Burner. Mm-hmm. Have it reference to something real, an atomic bomb, and just throw in some random cool stuff, and it all makes sense.
Yes,
it seems cool.
Yeah, it works. It's a solid formula.
So the other piece of this that is my absolute favorite is, so Paul is blind. Like as they're standing there, Paul's eyes are melting away, and he becomes blind. And specifically, it's established the Fremen, they don't take people who are maimed, people who can't survive on the desert on their own. They reclaim the water for the tribe because they can't carry someone who can't take care of themselves. But Paul, even though he is physically blind, he begins to use prescience to get literal vision. So he can consult his prescient memories to literally see exactly what's happening, including what color shirt someone is wearing, how they're standing, who's next to the other person, probably what it smells like, every aspect of it. And there's a scene in Heretics, so book 5 in Dune, where one of the Reverend Mothers is in a room that's been unsealed after thousands of years, and she's looking up, and the sky, or the top of the chamber is dusty and dirty, and she is able to tap her internal memories of lifetimes from thousands of years ago to be able to remember what was on the ceiling, and so she replicates that same move. I love that setup and callback.
That is good. Yeah. I like the fact that he sort of out of this weakness develops like some even greater superpower. And it kind of reminded me of, we talked about devs on this before, where where if your prediction engine is good enough, your modeling engine is good enough, you can predict the future. And that's basically what Paul's got going on, is some kind of, quantum level future predictor where he's able to see the present based on his extrapolation from the past.
All right, so we go from the Stoneburner scene to the trial of Korba. So this is basically Paul getting everybody together. He knows the Fremen have turned against them. And we have Aliyah very specifically Paul and Stilgar basically go through this charade of having an argument and fighting each other, specifically so that they can draw out the people and having Aaliyah analyzing them.
A few naives had come out to observe the treatment accorded a fellow Fremen. They brought on the clamour, exciting Korba to protest his innocence. Aaliyah moved her gaze across the Fremen faces, trying to recapture memories of the original men. The present blotted out the past. They'd all become hedonists, samplers of pleasures most men couldn't even imagine.
That really goes to this notion of the jihad has created wealth and adventure, but also scarred and sullied, what the Fremen used to be about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that really comes to, I feel like, fruition in the third book, which we'll get to eventually. But it's really neat to see how there's like this slow progression of the Fremen from the hardest guys in the galaxy to
the museum Fremen.
Yeah, belly up.
This is also the scene where they reveal that a worm has been stolen. Has been stolen and taken off world.
Right.
Which is a big problem.
Yeah, and you have Korba really denying things at the beginning, and in the end, they just sort of call him down on the carpet. He admits that he brought the stone burner, although he kind of says that it was stolen or it was handed off or something. So kind of like a bullshit piece there. But you definitely have Stilgar stepping up to want to clamp down, and you also have Aaliyah beginning to establish herself. To me, I see her as kind of like starting to separate from Paul a little bit, feeling left out in some of the strategy here, and starting to be a little more distrustful of him.
Yeah.
So those guys are removed, and we switch gears to the big showdown between Bajaz and Haitch. So essentially, but the whole concept for Bajaz is he's been put into position so that he can use his disc trans to basically sing or say or whatever this coded message that is going to trigger and plant this deep seed and activate it. And essentially, he tells him he knows that Paul will come to him saying that Chani is dead. And at that moment, that will trigger Duncan, and he will kill Paul outright.
Yeah, I love this. I love that. Like this catalyst dwarf was sent to imprint on Haitch the secret programming, and he does it through what is described as a keening, whining, monotonous theme repeated over and over. Herbert, along with this, is kind of like another thing along with the Samuda drug music, where he seems kind of fixed on this idea of music being hypnotic.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what was on his playlists right about then.
Yeah, I wonder what the Herbert playlist was like. My God.
Yeah, what was he listening to while he was writing this?
I don't know. That's a good question. We got to try to find that out.
He was hanging out in Sausalito on the houseboat, and probably White Rabbit was playing, and
yeah, I don't know. It might be something just even weirder than that, though. But yeah, it's good to know.
All right, so then we have Aaliyah and Haitch. So this has been setting up. We're told from the beginning that Haitch has been programmed specifically to be attractive to Aaliyah. And she is kind of freaking out. She doesn't know what's going on. So she ODs on spice, takes as much as she can. She can't see, this is interesting to me. She says that she can't see her children or their father.
The Bene Gesserit stumbled, she said. Now they wish to regain their balance by leaping beyond my brother. They want Chaney's baby, or mine. Are you with child? She struggled to fix herself in a time-space relationship to this question. With child? When? Where? I see my child, she whispered.
I'm trying to remember. I guess we can't get into spoilers, but I'm trying to remember her having children. She does. This is the introduction of her seeing visions of Duncan, young and old and young again. And we have this quote.
And she shuddered, knowing she saw the vision her brother had seen. Unwanted tears burned her eyes. She shook her head sharply. No tears. They wasted moisture, and worse, distracted the harsh flow of vision. Paul must be stopped. Once, just once, she had bridged time to place her voice where he would pass. But stress and mutability would not permit that here. The web of time passed through her brother now like rays of light through a lens. He stood at the focus, and he knew it. He had gathered all the lines to himself and would not permit them to escape or change.
Yeah, I highlighted that same passage from this. I love that concept of Paul as the lens of time. I think is a good description of what's going on. Like Herbert plays with all these different metaphors to explain Paul, like to explain the nature of the Kwisatz Haderach. So the notion of his vision was meant to be fluid, and the idea that here though is that it's become fixed through a focal point.
Go, Proto. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not sure. With the visions, it seems like, with Paul, he could see multiple futures of what was lying ahead. And maybe what Elias is seeing is a future that never comes to fruition because of what happens later in the book. Mm-hmm. So there was a future where, her and Duncan had children together and, a different life. But because of the events that take place where this plan that seems to be inevitable, this conspiracy doesn't play out the way it's intended and Paul escapes it, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. That's a good point, because essentially, I love this image. I can picture this from a film perspective. You could see Paul, like floating in time, holding all of these rays of light, right? And everything focused around him. And the whole concept, I think, is that you expect the hero to take the active role, to be like, I'm going to go do the thing, or I know what to do. I'm going to lead people in this way. And I think the only thing that the most surprising choice for him to make is for him to say, I'm going to disengage and I'm going to walk away from this.
In general, like the big tensions in Herbert's kind of universe are between stagnation and, wild, out of control energy. Mm-hmm. And so, you had the energy of the jihad, and then you have, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but then you have the energy of the great scattering that happens later. And then when you have too much prescience or too much control, you have just these long periods of stagnation, which is sort of what Paul was also trying. I think the big evil that Paul tried to avoid and was willing to kill 61 billion people in service of was this great stagnation that would have, just tamped down humankind for generations.
Totally. All right, so we cut to Paul outside Sietch Tabor as we begin our approach to the finale of the book. And so Paul, he is he's pretty bummed out.
Life changed those irascible wastes into shapes of grace and movement, he thought. That was the message of the desert. Contrast stunned him with realization. He wanted to turn to the aides massed in the Sietch entrance, shout at them. If you need something to worship, then worship life. All life, every last crawling bit of it. We're all in this beauty together. They wouldn't understand. In the desert, they were endlessly desert. Growing things performed no green ballet for them. He clenched his fists at his sides, trying to halt the vision. He wanted to flee from his own mind. It was a beast come to devour him. Awareness lay in him, sodden, heavy, with all the living it had sponged up, saturated with too many experiences. Desperately, Paul squeezed his thoughts outward. Stars. Awareness turned over at the thought of all those stars above him, an infinite volume. A man must be half mad to imagine he could rule even a teardrop of that volume. He couldn't begin to imagine the number of subjects his imperium claimed. Subjects. Worshippers and enemies, more likely. Did any among them see beyond rigid beliefs? Where was one man who'd escaped the narrow destiny of his prejudices? Not even an emperor escaped. He'd lived a take-everything life, tried to create a universe in his own image, but the exultant universe was breaking across him at last with its silent waves. I spit on Dune, he thought. I give it my moisture. This myth he'd made out of intricate movements and imagination, out of moonlight and love, out of prayers older than Adam, and grey cliffs and crimson shadows, laments and rivers of martyrs. What had it come to at last? When the waves receded, the shores of time would spread out there, clean, empty, shining with infinite grains of memory and little else. Was this the golden genesis of man?
It's good. It's good. That's good. That's a good passage. That's a good, thematic sum up of where we are right now in the story.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it kind of, watching that video that you sent about the history of Dune and then hearing that, you can see how Herbert is just really showing how history and human society is cyclical of, where the thing that happened before is happening again. But at this point, it's just on a much grander scale. Paul is Alexander the Great sitting at the end thinking, what has it all come to? Like, here I am. I'm the emperor of the galaxy, but for what purpose? What reason? The rise and the spread throughout the stars really he even has like a Dark Ages built into there and a time of 10,000 emperors. And it's like, this is all the stuff that happened like in our own history on Earth.
Right.
It's just happening throughout the galaxy now. So he has like this great reference to just history repeating itself that I love. And that passage, I think, really captures that idea of this ultimate ruler.
It's also kind of weird because this is also like Paul's gone here because of the birth of his child. He thinks just his daughter. And yet he kind of knows what's going to come along with that. And so the whole mood is just so melancholy. He's just in a bummed out state. Our Paul is not doing his best right now.
The part that really speaks to me in this is the notion of worshiping life and love. And the idea of, at the end of the day, he is the emperor of the universe, and what he cares about is his Sihaya is in the Sietch and is about to die, and he knows it, and there's nothing he can do about it. And so that's where he's trapped. And in fact, just moments later, Paul hears the death knell, and he knows what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So he turns and there's Hate waiting for him. And so this is the moment where, he goes up and he tells Hate that Chani has died, and instantly Hate is ready to kill him, is reaching for his knife and preparing to kill him. And Paul basically just stops him and forces him to look inside and become Duncan, which no Gola supposedly has ever been able to recall their previous memories and become the full persona. What was your take on that transformation?
It's dope. I like this whole thing. It's another classic in this book where it's sort of the same thing, where the plots that people are planning are just immediately transparent to Paul. But it's the things that he can't avoid that are unavoidable anyway. And so, Duncan figures out that Bijaz has placed a compulsion on him, and he tells Paul, he's like, they've placed a compulsion upon me. And Paul says, what's the compulsion for? And he says, violence. Like, he knows what's going to happen. And then it immediately happens. The description of Duncan awakening is great. Paul says she is gone. And then the Gola heard the words out of a blazing corona. They burned his chest, his backbone, the sockets of his metal eyes. He felt his right hand move forward toward the knife at his belt. His own thinking became strange, disjointed. And it's just like, it's really great. Like, and then basically Paul turns him by reminding him of his duty as a Atreides, as an Atreides. It's just great. I love it. I like it a lot. And there's also, this notion of, it says, Paul basically says to him, we will not run. He said, we'll move with dignity. We'll do what must be done. The Gola's muscles locked. He shuddered. He swayed. What must be done? The words rolled in his mind like a great fish surfacing. That's good. That's strong. I like the great fish surfacing.
Nice.
Yeah. Just another concept that is so compelling that Herbert makes with this Gola, and then the relationship with Paul. And it's kind of cool because it's, he has this compulsion to kill Paul that's activated, but then Paul gives him another compulsion that's deep inside his memory as Duncan to be loyal to the Atreides. And that kind of like trumps it in a way, which is so cool.
I love it. And when they talk about it, a few minutes later, they're talking about it with Bijaz.
Trigger, Paul asked. The compulsion to kill you, Idaho said, rage thick in his voice. Mencat computation. They found that I thought of you as the son I never had. Rather than slay you, the true Duncan Idaho would take over the Gola body.
I just think that's awesome. That Atreides loyalty and love is deep. And we talked about that in the first book, how strong, it's more like a family than a service.
Mm-hmm.
They head inside. Paul is taken he sees Chani's body. And he is he's still using his prescience to be able to see her, but he's almost blind. And there's a reference to like he's starting to lose his sight, and he's kind of like falling back. And this notion that he had no vision of twins, only his daughter, which I assume is from oracular blindness to Leto II, who is the most spiciest.
The spiciest.
Yeah. Of the bunch.
Yeah.
So then we have this showdown with Scytale. So Paul is taken to the room to see the twins, and Scytale kind of walks in, and Paul knows that he's a face dancer. He walks right up and he has a knife on the twins.
Mm-hmm, yeah, not great security.
Nobody could like think that you shouldn't let him get that close.
Yeah, it feels like maybe there should have been some kind of operational security there around the heirs to the Empire.
Well, you have Paul in this moment. He asks Aaliyah to take over for him in the negotiation with Scytale, and Scytale's basically asking for them to, give up everything. But also, there's this sort of activation of this second plot where basically Scytale says, "Look at Duncan. He is restored now. We can do the same thing with Chani." So I guess my question is this the real plot of the Tleilaxu? Like they wanted Paul to turn, this is the final feint within a feint for this book. They wanted Paul to turn hate into Duncan so that he could prove to himself that they could make a real Chani.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think this was the final system of control that they had planned. Was like, yeah. It's not. We know that there's something that can be achieved here. That Paul could make the Gola awaken to his true self, and then with that, if that happens, what can we do? It's a pretty clever trap, actually.
Because it's love, right?
Yeah.
They're striking at the root there. So Paul, almost blind, is able to extend his vision. And again, this is not directly explained, but he's essentially able to see himself through Leto's eyes. And there's great descriptions of the perspective changing from where he is to be able to be, and his shock of being able to see through Leto's eyes.
Yeah, that is a dope. That I think kind of is the big payoff for the whole book, is basically this one paragraph where Paul sees himself through Leto's eyes, and he is himself surprised by the fact that he is gaining sight through his infant child's eyes, and that's what allows him to kind of overcome this moment. It's a really cool. It's some cool stuff.
Yeah, totally wild.
Did they describe why they are born with awareness?
No, they did not.
So do we think Chani took the water of life, or?
I just think they're the children of Paul Muad'Dib.
Okay.
They're the children of the Kwisatz Haderach, so they get a special.
Preloaded.
They get preloaded. That's right. Yeah.
That's what I assumed as well.
Okay, fair enough. So you have this great shot of Paul, who is already kind of being ignored by Scytale, having switched over to Aaliyah, which was a smart move by Paul. But him slowly pulling out the knife and then executing the flawless throw. This is back to the whirling drone with the 12 lights. The 1 in a million throw to hit Scytale through the eye, and he is done.
Yeah.
Paul still got it, baby.
Still got it.
All right, so now we have our second temptation. I guess maybe this is where maybe it's Bijaz that is offering him the right to get Chani back. But essentially, Paul says,
"There are problems in this universe for which there are no answers. Nothing can be done." As he spoke, Paul felt his link with the vision shatter. His mind cowered, overwhelmed by infinite possibilities. His lost vision became like the wind, blowing where it willed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I skipped one piece, which is that Duncan kills Bijaz, just out of hand.
"As you love me," Paul said, still in battle tongue, "do me this favor. Kill him before I succumb." "No!" Bijaz screamed. The sound stopped abruptly with a frightened grunt. "I did him the kindness," Idaho said.
Yeah. There's some murders. You got to kill some murders, You got to do some last minute murders, clean up some loose ends.
What did you think about that, Proto? Just judge, jury, executioner there on Bijaz.
Very, very, very Duncan-like to do something like that. There are, throughout these books, a bunch of quick murders that happen. that kind of hit you without there's not a level of drama that you might expect with the character of an importance being offed, but it can happen pretty quickly, as we'll see as well in the next book, where someone's just like, someone pulls out a knife, kills somebody in a flash, and they're dead, and that character's over.
Well, and in the next paragraph, in the next chapter too, like there's a bunch of other just people who just get whacked like off screen, and so she says it's a scene between Stilgar and Duncan. It says she commanded the execution of the traitors, she being Aaliyah. Oh, Idaho suppressed a feeling of vertigo as he looked up at the promontory. Which traitors? The Guildsmen, the Reverend Mother Mohaim, Korba, a few others. And Idaho says, "You slew a Reverend Mother?" And Stilgar says, "I did. Muad'Dib left word that it should not be done." He shrugged, but I disobeyed him, as he knew I would. And it's just like, yeah, just had to go. And like killing Reverend Mother Gaius Mohaim off screen is like kind of a move. So,
welcome to the Aaliyah administration.
Yeah, the Aaliyah administration gives no fucks. You are going to get knifed.
Yeah. Oh man. So we end with Duncan here.
Mentat awareness projected the outflowing patterns into the future. The possibilities dazzled him. Paul had set in motion a whirling vortex, and nothing could stand in its path. The Bene Tleilax and the Guild had overplayed their hands and had lost, were discredited. The Kizarat was shaken by the treason of Korba and others high within it, and Paul's final voluntary act, his ultimate acceptance of their customs, had ensured the loyalty of the Fremen to him and to his house. He was one of them forever now.
Yeah. Good work, Paul. Kind of a weird ending for you, but sure. You're out there in the desert now. And like it ends with this poem, the Gola's hymn, of Paul being referred to as the fool saint who strides through the long cavern of time, scattering the fool self of his dream. And this book was almost titled The Fool Saint. That was its original working title. And so that's like this real key to understand. It's just an unexpected end to Paul Muad'Dib, the special boy who developed special powers and saved the galaxy and avenged his father's death, and now is this complicated religious figure. It's an interesting odyssey.
Yeah.
So does he redeem himself, Proto, in your mind, by stepping off the train, taking himself out in the only way that he could, not in a blaze of glory, not in battle, but literally just walking into the desert?
I think it's beautiful. I love it. I think it's poetic. It wraps up one aspect of him where he's an Atreides born on Caladan. He comes to this foreign world kind of and is left without a people. He's kind of an orphan. And then there's this thought that, he joins the Fremen, but maybe he's not really a Fremen. Is he really a Fremen? He's kind of a god who's adopted by the Fremen. So that he would end it, after all that he's been through, by doing this final act where, blind Fremen wander out into the desert to their death, and that's his ending. I thought it just a nice way that it wraps up the story and is kind of a nod to him truly belonging to this people.
That's his ending, or is it?
Or is it? Dun, dun.
Stay tuned.
Hint, there's another 500 books.
Well, and I do like the idea of through the first two books, Paul is obviously the focus of everything that we have. When you step back and you look at the context across 6 books, it's a very different view.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's kind of an incredible concept that Herbert would be able to shift from take your main hero and then sort of push them to the side and allow somebody to grow beyond that.
Yeah,
that's pretty radical.
Yeah, it is.
We did it.
Dune Messiah.
I ended up landing on really liking this book.
We know it's Proto's favorite book of all time.
What's number 2 on the list, Proto?
Number 2, books all time?
All time.
Well, I've said for a while my favorite book is Blood Meridian by Quinn McCarthy.
It's a strong book. That's a strong book.
Oh, man. That's amazing.
The Comanche scene is maybe the most ridiculous writing I've ever read.
It's up there.
I didn't finish it when I attempted it a year ago.
It's pretty bleak.
It's pretty bleak. Nihilistic. I was like, and I love The Road.
Yeah.
But I was like,
it's worse than The Road somehow. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were going to say Infinite Jest, Proto.
You know what? I made it 100-page in the Infinite Jest, and that's where my journey ended. But right there, yeah.
Well, I may have to pick up Blood Meridian again.
That's a pretty strong book.
How about you, Jason? What's your other?
I don't know. I've always, as we talked about before, I always have like ranking problems when it comes to books, like things that I loved, and then I don't know. It depends on sort of my mood. I think at one point in time, Infinite Jest probably would have been my number one, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I went through my David Foster Wallace phase, and so I feel I'm a different person now. Like this Dune ranks up pretty high. The first Dune is pretty important to me. But like I also like Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge is a book I come back to a lot and would read again in a minute.
I haven't reread that in a long time, but Werner is one of my all-time favorite. That entire series is incredible.
Yeah,
and Rainbow's End is one of my favorites.
Rainbow's End is really good too. I mean, he's just a great writer overall. I really like his writing. What else have I read that I like? N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy is really good. Yeah, it's really good. That was like of stuff I've read recently. One that like kind of broke open my mind to like what genre fiction could be.
1984, one of my probably up or near the top of my list.
I've heard about it. I've heard about it.
It always works.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is Dune Messiah. Let's kick it over and take a look at letters.
Yeah. Letters. We ran a poll in advance of this episode to ask who people thought would be the top villain in both Dune and Dune Messiah. And we gave folks 4 choices. Those 4 choices being Feyd-Rautha, the Baron Harkonnen, Scytale, and the Reverend Mother Gaius Helena. And the leading option right now is Baron Harkonnen, which I think is okay as a choice. But an astute Dune Pod follower, whose username is Atreidka, quickly pointed out that the right answer is Paul Atreides, which is correct. Paul Atreides is the best villain of the first 2 books.
Nice. We also received our first email from Singapore.
Oh, lovely.
Subject, hello from Singapore. This is from Bryce Kelly.
Bryce Kelly. Love Bryce Kelly.
Hello, Dune Pod pals. I've really enjoyed all of your episodes so far. All of the episodes so far have been a dose of ear bleach from the ongoing shitfires of U.S. politics and global pandemic news. Excellent. I have to say I've been surprised by how much I've enjoyed the movie reviews. The Ex Machina episode was the first episode where I had not read the book or seen the movie. My read of the trailer matched the dude humps robot description. And after listening, I watched and really enjoyed the movie. My friend Tom, fairly sure he's the other person downloading the pod in Singapore, pointed me to an interview with Alex Garland on another podcast called Artificial Intelligence, in which he noted the most telling part of the whole movie, and one he feels people don't really pay enough attention to, was the scene where Ava, as she walks through the living room, smiles to herself at a time where she knows no one is watching her. But overall, I really like the approach of having a product management tech view of the movie. I think having a blueprint of the plot and understanding some of the themes made for a great way to watch a movie. Anyway, that podcast and the subsequent viewing of Ex Machina led me to Devs, which was also a surprising treat. P.S. My intro to Dune, the book, was a borrowed copy from Jason almost 20 years ago.
Oh, how lovely to hear from Bryce Kelly, a true friend, and not only my first boss in product management ever in my career.
Wow.
But a great friend and also very responsible for my music tastes in the 2000 to 2002 period, like all of like the post-rock, alt-rock, California influenced music of that time. I owe my love of to Bryce Kelly.
Nice.
We send him greetings in the Lion City.
Yes. Thank you for writing, Bryce. And for everyone else, letters@dunepod.com. You can send us email. You can send us voicemail attached as an audio file. Just make a recording on your iPhone and send it over. We'd love to hear from you and be happy to play you on our show.
We have one other important piece of business to cover, of course.
Yes.
Which is now that we have completed part 2, we can discuss who would Tilda Swinton play in Dune Messiah. Matt, since you are first among equals on this podcast, why don't you start?
I'm going to go with Bajaz.
Strong choice.
I think she has an inspired take. Like, I would love to hear her disc trans work. Mm-hmm. Like, I think her
humming, keening humming.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There would be like, they'd be like, hey, we have a thing. We're going to play some stuff. And she's like, you know what? I got this. And it would be absolutely incredible.
I like it. Proto?
Dang, I think Bajaz is the only answer now.
Bajaz is a good answer. I am going to put forward Hate/Duncan Idaho. First of all, I think she could really sell the Zen Sunni part of Hate. And it would bring something interesting to that dimension of his character. Second, I think she would really sell the transition. I think if you're going to have someone portray Duncan Idaho Hate, you have to sell the transition from when he becomes self-aware. And I think she would be uniquely qualified to deliver her consciousness expanding in a corona of flames or whatever the passage was that I cited. So I'd be excited to see her take on that.
That would give us the opportunity to see her in like 6 more movies.
Yeah, all of the movies, basically. Yeah. You never get rid of Duncan Idaho.
Proto, any final thoughts?
Love the book. I'll be reading it again someday. And I'll be praying every night that we get a sequel to the movie that never comes out. And we get a Dune Messiah.
Can you have a sequel to a film that has never been released?
I like it. I like that as another twist on my dystopian fantasy of what happens with the Dune movie, which is that the movie never comes out. We have to wait for Le Petit Stewie Villeneuve to make it.
But they keep making more of them.
But they keep making more of them.
Right.
Yeah. And only like every third one actually comes out or something like that. Like you don't get that many. It's going to be great.
I like it. And that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank Jason and Proto for the engaging conversation, as always. Next week, we return to the work of the maestro himself, Denis Villeneuve, with his previous desert masterpiece, 2015's Sicario. This gorgeous film was shot by Denis' frequent collaborator, the great Roger Deakins, so I highly recommend you give it a watch this week before listening. You can thank me later. If you're enjoying this podcast, we need your help. Please leave us a rating and a review or share our social media posts, as it really helps new listeners find the show. Thank you. Dune Pod is a production of Haitch Industries, a member of the Paper Keg Radio Syndicate. The episode was produced and edited by me, H. Our artwork is by Catcher, and our theme music was composed by Toby Forsman of Whipsong Music. Thanks for listening. We'll see everybody next week.